Most people don't really think about Romans and locks in the same sentence. You think about the Colosseum or the aqueducts or whatever, not some small metal thing on a door. But here's what nobody talks about. Locks and keys have been showing up in Roman digs for decades now. Pompeii, Britain, North Africa, soldiers' barracks, private homes, merchant shops. The same little iron and bronze mechanisms scattered across 3 continents wherever Rome went. Not the big monuments, but the small stuff. The stuff that tells you how Romans lived and thought about things like privacy and theft and who gets to open what door. Because here is the thing, the lock on your front door right now, the Yale lock that pretty much every home in the world uses, did not come from some 19th century inventor sitting in a workshop. Romans already had it. The mechanism was already there 2,000 years ago, and then it got lost, and then somebody basically just found it again. So did Rome invent the modern lock? Let's find out. Well, before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe. But only if you like this video. So let's get into it. The wooden tumbler lock system. You know that key you use every single day to open your house? Yeah, that little thing you thought was invented by a modern scientist. Romans basically already had that 2,000 years ago. Wild, right? But it goes back even further than Rome, way further. We are talking about ancient Egypt. 4,000 years ago, someone looked at a door and thought, how do I stop people from getting in? And what they came up with was so simple it is almost embarrassing. Wooden pegs. That is it. Just some wooden pegs inside a wooden block, and gravity did the rest. No metal, no springs, nothing fancy. The pegs just fell down into holes in the bolt and kept it from moving. And to open the door, you had this giant wooden key, about 2 feet long, and you would stick it through a hole in the door and lift all the pegs up at the same time, and the bolt would slide open. Archaeologists dug up real ones of these at a place in Egypt called Karanis. The wood survived because the desert is so dry nothing rots there. And when they found them, the first thing everyone noticed was just how big these keys were. Not something you carry in your pocket, more like something you carry on your shoulder. But here is the thing nobody really talks about. That basic idea of different size pegs that all need to line up before the bolt moves, that idea never died. Greeks started messing with it, made the pegs from metal, made the keys smaller. Then Romans came along and completely rebuilt the whole thing in steel and added springs so gravity was not doing the work anymore. That one change, the springs, was huge, because now your lock could go sideways, upside down, anywhere, and it would still work. You were not depending on gravity pulling things down. And then medieval Europe. Same idea again. Different look, different materials, but same logic underneath. Lift the pins, line them up and move the bolt. Nobody really reinvented it. They just kept building on top of what was already there, going all the way back to those big wooden Egyptian pegs. The whole world still uses a version of that same logic every time someone turns a key. It just took 2,000 years of refinements to get it into your pocket. Steel spring mechanisms. Here is where things get strange. A guy with a metal detector was walking around a field in Germany in 2023, and he finds this tiny gold thing, so small it fits on your fingernail, literally smaller than a €1 coin. Nobody knew what it was at first. Well, they knew it was Roman. They could tell that much. 3rd or 4th century. But what was inside it nobody could figure out because the gold casing was so thick and so dense that normal X-rays could not penetrate it. The inside just showed up empty in the scans, like there was nothing there. So they took it to the Paul Scherrer Institute in Switzerland, and instead of X-rays they used neutrons. A totally different thing. Neutrons pass through gold much more easily, and they can pick up iron on the other side. And what they found when the scan came back, nobody was expecting it. A spring, a working bolt, a guide rail, a base plate, a whole functioning lock mechanism, inside something the size of your thumbnail. And this thing is 1,600 years old. The spring especially, That is the part that got researchers. Because springs sound simple, right? But making a spring that tiny that still holds tension after 1,600 years is not simple at all. The iron was shaped so precisely it looked like something from a modern watch factory, not something made by hand. And here is what makes this more interesting. Spring technology in locks was first developed by the Hellenistic Greeks, the civilization that came before Rome. Romans took that idea and ran with it, made it smaller, made it stronger, made it work in any position so you did not need gravity anymore. Because that was the whole problem with the older wooden locks. Gravity. Everything depended on gravity pulling those pins down, which meant your lock could only go one way, fixed to the wall in one specific position. You could not carry it around. You could not put it on a box or a chest or a bag. Once you have a spring, though, everything changes. Now the spring is doing the work that gravity used to do, and when you pull the key out, the spring just pushes everything back into a locked position automatically. No extra steps. Just pull the key and it locks itself. That gold lock from Germany had exactly that system inside. A spring doing all the work, and that one tiny detail is basically the same reason your padlock works the way it does today. Warded locks. Romans did not just stop at springs and pins, they kept going. And one of the things they came up with is something called a warded lock. And it is so simple when you understand it, but it took everyone else about 1,500 years to move past it. So here is the idea. Inside the lock there are these little metal pieces sticking out, fixed in place, not moving, just sitting there blocking the way. And if you try to put the wrong key in, it just hits those pieces and stops. Cannot turn, cannot move. Nothing happens. But if you have the right key, it has grooves cut into it in exactly the right spots that match where those metal pieces are. So the key slides right past them like they are not even there, and then it can turn and open the bolt. That is it. That is a warded lock. Wards are just metal obstacles that block the wrong key and let the right one through. Romans get the credit for this. Before Rome, the Greeks had their sickle-shaped keys that just kind of hooked the bolt and pulled it, which gave basically no security at all. Anyone with a bent piece of metal could get in. Romans said, no, let's make the inside of the lock itself the security. Put obstacles in there. Make the key prove itself before it gets to touch the bolt. And the thing about this design is it just worked for a very long time. Medieval Europe was still using the same basic Roman ward idea hundreds of years after Rome was gone. Locksmiths in Germany and France in the Middle Ages were making locks that were more or less the same thing, just with fancier decoration on the outside. The security was still just dependent on warding all the way through that whole period. Why did nobody try to improve it for so long? Probably because it worked well enough. You did not need fancy tools or tiny precision parts, just metal sticking out in the right places and a key cut to match. Anyone with basic metalworking skills could do it. The one problem that came up later is that warded locks can be picked. If you make a key with almost no material on it, just a thin skeleton that clears all the wards, it can sometimes open locks it was never meant for. That is where the term skeleton key comes from. Romans did not solve that problem. That only got properly fixed much later in the 1700s and 1800s, when more advanced lock designs came back around. But for what Romans needed it for? Doors, chests, storage boxes across the whole empire? The warded lock did the job for centuries. Programmable combination locks. Forget the key for a second. Just forget it exists. What if you did not need a key at all? What if the lock itself was the puzzle and you just had to know the answer? That is basically what Romans did with combination locks, and nobody really talks about this one. So the whole idea is there are these little discs inside the lock. Each one has a small notch cut into it, and all those notches need to line up at the same time before the bolt can move. To make them line up, you turn each disc to the right position. No key, just turning. If you know the right positions for each disc, you open it. If you do not, you are just spinning discs forever and the door stays shut. Gizmodo wrote about this and said Romans pioneered the earliest combination locks, turned the key from a physical object into basically an idea, a sequence, something you know rather than something you hold. And think about what that means. If someone steals your key, they can get in. But if the lock opens with a sequence of movements that only you know, there is nothing to steal, nothing to copy, nothing to lose. The secret is just in your head. Now here is where it gets even more interesting. Research on Roman combination locks found something called a programmable version, meaning you could reset it, change the combination. So if you thought someone had figured out your sequence, you could just change it, like changing a password. In ancient Rome, that is not a simple thing to build. To make a lock where you can move the notch positions around on the internal discs and set a new combination requires proper engineering. It is not just a clever idea. It is a clever idea that someone then had to figure out how to build in metal without any modern tools. And then after Rome, this kind of thing just disappeared, not improved on, not developed further, just gone. The documented history of combination locks after Rome jumps all the way to the 1600s, a gap of over 1,000 years where nobody was doing this. James Sargent in the 1800s gets credit for making the first key-changeable combination lock, but Romans already had the concept of resetting your combination way before that. The idea was there, it just got lost. So next time you spin the dial on a padlock or type a code into a door, remember that whole idea of a sequence instead of a key. Romans were already there. Puzzle and mask padlocks. Taking the key out of the equation was not the only trick Romans had. Some of them went in a completely different direction and put faces on their locks. Yes, a padlock with a face on it. A tiny little thing with a human or animal face carved into the front of it. And the face is not just decoration. The face is part of how the lock works. Romans made these. Researchers found 156 documented examples spread across Europe, mostly in the region around the Danube River. The study that catalogued all of them took years of searching through museums and private collections and old books just to find that many. So these were not rare experimental things. This was a real category of lock that real people used in the real world. What they were mostly used for is sending money or valuables. You put your coins or your jewelry in a small bag or pouch, and then you locked this mask padlock onto it and sent it off. The person receiving it would know what their specific lock looked like, what face it had. So if the bag arrived and the lock was different or looked tampered with, they would know immediately something was wrong before they even tried to open it. That is 2 layers of security at the same time. The lock itself is one layer. The appearance of the lock is the second layer. You cannot just break it and replace it with another lock because the other person knows what their lock looks like. A thief has to somehow get the exact same face design, which they cannot. Researchers who built replica versions of these found out the face itself was not just sitting on top. In a lot of them, the face plates had specific parts you had to push or move in the right order before a key would even work. So you could have the right key, but if you did not know to push this part here or pull that part there, the key would not do anything. The lock would just sit there. Think about that. A thief in ancient Rome finds one of these locks, tries a key but nothing happens, tries another key, still nothing, because they do not even know there are extra steps before the key matters. The puzzle is the first wall and the key is the second wall. And all of this on something the size of your palm, small enough to clip onto a money pouch. This was not rough, simple metal work. Whoever made these knew exactly what they were doing, and whoever used them understood that security is not just about the lock. It is about the thief, not even knowing where to start. Wearable key rings. While some Romans were putting secret combinations into their locks and faces on their padlocks, other Romans were solving a completely different problem. Where do you put the key when your clothes have no pockets because they wear togas? And that is the whole issue. The toga has no pockets, nowhere to put anything, and Romans needed to carry keys around all day. So what do? You wear it. Romans figured out that if you cannot carry a key, you just make it into a ring and put it on your finger. Simple as that. Researchers found over 46 of these key rings just from one Roman region called Dacia, which is modern-day Romania. 46 confirmed pieces from one area alone. That tells you this was not some rare fancy thing. People used these. The ring had a small key bit attached to it. That key bit was shaped to match a specific lock, so every ring was made for one lock and one lock only. You could not just use anyone's ring, it had to be yours, made for your lock. According to studies, these rings were made from bronze, iron, and even silver and gold, depending on how rich the person was. So whether rich or not, almost everyone had one. And here is the thing that really gets you. These rings were found buried with their owners in graves. People wanted to take their keys with them after death. That says a lot about how much these things meant to them. It was not just a tool, it was personal. The craftsmanship needed to make these was no joke either. The person making it had to shape the ring part so it sits comfortably on a finger and at the same time attach a working key that fits a real lock. All done by hand, no machines, just skill and tools. And they pulled it off. Across the whole empire. From Britain to Egypt you find these things. After Rome fell, this idea just disappeared. Later European clothing had pockets, so there was no need for it anymore. But for those centuries, Romans were walking around with their security on their fingers and buried with it when they died. That is not just clever engineering, that is something that mattered enough to carry into the next life. So here is where we land. Romans had spring-loaded locks, combination locks you could reset, padlocks with puzzle faces, keys you wore on your finger, all of this 2,000 years ago. And then we lost it. Like genuinely lost it. Some of this stuff disappeared for over 1,000 years, and then someone in the 1800s came along and got credit for inventing it. But the idea was already there, already built, already used by regular people on regular doors in regular Roman streets. What gets me is these were not experiments sitting in some rich person's collection. These were everyday objects. Shopkeepers used them, soldiers used them. People were buried with them because they mattered that much. Rome did not just build big things, they also built precise things, small things, things that worked so well nobody needed to improve them for almost 2,000 years. Now just think about how many other things sitting in a museum right now are older versions of something we use today, and nobody has connected the dots yet. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.